Lincoln had given his speech at Gettysburg, and the ride home to Washington took until midnight. Lincoln was tired, talked little, stretched out on one of the side seats in the drawing room, and had a wet towel laid across his eyes and forehead. He had stood that day the world's foremost spokesman of popular government, saying that democracy was yet worth fighting for. He had spoken as one in mist who might head on deeper yet into mist. He incarnated the assurances and pretenses of popular government, implied that it could and might perish from the earth. What he meant by a new birth of freedom for the nation could have 1,000 interpretations. The taller riddles of democracy stood up out of the address. It had the dream touch of vast and furious events epitomized for any foreteller to read what was to come. His cadences sang the ancient song that where there is freedom, men have fought and sacrificed for it, and that freedom is worth men's dying for. For the first time since he became president, he had, on a dramatic occasion, declaimed Jefferson's proposition: all men are created equal, leaving no other inference than that he regarded the Negro slave as a man. Back at Gettysburg, the blue haze of the Cumberland Mountains had dimmed till it was a blur in a nocturne. The moon was up and fell with a bland golden benevolence on the new-made graves of soldiers, on the sepulchres of old settlers, on the horse carcasses of which the onrush of war had not yet permitted removal. The New York Herald man walked amid them and ended the story he sent his paper. The air, the trees, the graves are silent. Even the relic hunters are gone now. And the soldiers here never wake to the sound of reveille. In many a country cottage over the land, a tall old clock in a quiet corner told time in a tick-tock deliberation. Face and dial of the clock had known the eyes of a boy who listened to its tick-tock and learned to read its minute and hour hands. And the boy had seen years measured off by the swinging pendulum, and grown to man's size had gone away. And the people in the cottage knew that the clock would stand there, and the boy never again come into the room and look at the clock with the query, what is the time? In a row of graves of the unidentified, the boy would sleep long in the dedicated final resting place at Gettysburg. Why he had gone away and why he would never come back had roots in some mystery of flags and drums, of national fate in which individuals sink as in a deep sea, of men swallowed and vanished in a man-made storm of smoke and steel. The mystery deepened and moved with ancient music and inviolable consolation, because a solemn man of authority had stood at the graves of the unidentified and spoken the words. We cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. From these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. To the pendulum swing of a tall old clock in a quiet corner, they might read those words, while outside the windows the first flurry of snow blew across the orchard and down over the meadow. The beginnings of winter in a gunmetal gloaming to be later arched with a star-flung sky. Death was in the air, so was birth. What was dying, few could say. What was being born, none could know. Lincoln, did he gather the feel of the American dream and see its kindred over the earth, saying, the strongest bond of human sympathy outside of the family relation should be one uniting all working people of all nations and tongues and kindreds. Let not him who is houseless pull down the house of another, but let him labor diligently and build one for himself, thus by example assuring that his own shall be safe from violence when built. As labor is the common burden of our race, so the effort of some to shift their share of the burden onto the shoulders of others is the great durable curse of the race. I hold, if the Almighty had ever made a set of men that should do all of the eating and none of the work, he would have made them with mouths only and no hands. And if he had ever made another class that he had intended should do all the work and none of the eating, he would have made them without mouths and all hands. The same spirit that says, you toil and work and earn bread and I'll eat it. No matter in what shape it comes, whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his own nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another race. It is the same tyrannical principle. The sheep and the wolf are not agreed upon a definition of the word liberty. Lincoln, he was a dreamer. He saw ships at sea. He saw himself living and dead in dreams that came. Into a secretary's diary, December 23, 1863, went an entry. The president tonight had a dream. He was in a party of plain people, and as it became known who he was, they began to comment on his appearance. One of them said, he's a very common-looking man. The president replied, the Lord prefers common-looking people. That is the reason he makes so many of them. Lincoln, he spoke one verse for then and for now. If we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could better judge what to do and how to do it.
This funeral oration was delivered in the third year of the American Civil War by Abraham Lincoln.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Abraham Lincoln, his second inaugural address, delivered at Washington, March 4th, 1865.
Fellow countrymen, at this second appearing to take the oath of the presidential office, there is less occasion for an extended address than there was at first. Then a statement somewhat in detail of a course to be pursued seemed very fitting and proper. Now, at the expiration of 4 years, during which public declarations have been constantly called forth on every point and phase of the great contest, which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation, little that is new could be presented. The progress of our arms, upon which all else chiefly depends, is as well known to the public as to myself, and it is, I trust, reasonably satisfactory and encouraging to all with high hope for the future. No prediction in regard to it is ventured. On the occasion corresponding to this, 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All dreaded it, all sought to avoid it. While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, the insurgent agents were in the city seeking to destroy it with war, seeking to dissolve the Union and divide the effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the object for which the insurgents would rend the Union by war, while the government claimed no right to do more than to restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Neither anticipated that the cause of the conflict might cease when, or even before, the conflict itself should cease. Each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but Let us judge not that we be not judged. The prayer of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which in the providence of God must needs come, but which having continued through his appointed time he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both North and South this terrible war, as the woe due to those by whom the offense came, shall we discern there any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in a living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another, drawn with a sword. As was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said that the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphans, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
If Nancy Hanks came back as a ghost, seeking news of what she loved most, she'd ask first,
"Where's my son? What's happened to Abe? What's he done? Poor little Abe, left all alone, except for Tom, who's a rolling stone. He was only 9 the year I died. I remember still how hard he cried, scraping along in a little shack with hardly a shirt to cover his back, and a prairie wind to blow him down, or pinching times if he went to town. You wouldn't know about my son. Did he grow tall? Did he have fun? Did he learn to read? Did he get to town? Do you know his name? Did he get on?
It is portentous and a thing of state that here at midnight in our little town a mourning figure walks and will not rest near the old courthouse, pacing up and down. Or by his homestead or in shadowy yards he lingers where his children used to play, or through the market on the well-worn stones, he stalks until the dawn stars burn away. A bronze, lank man, his suit of ancient black, a famous high-top hat and plain-worn shawl make him the quaint, great figure that men love, the prairie lawyer, master of us all. He cannot sleep upon his hillside now. He is among us as in times before. And we who toss and lie awake for long breathe deep and start to see him pass the door. His head is bowed. He thinks of men and kings. Yea, when the sick world cries, how can he sleep? Too many peasants fight, they know not why. Too many homesteads in black terror weep. The sins of all the warlords burn his heart. He sees the dreadnoughts scouring every main. He carries on his shawl-wrapped shoulders now the bitterness, the folly, and the pain. He cannot rest until a spirit dawn shall come, the shining hope of Europe free, a league of sober folk, the workers' earth, bringing long peace to cornland, Alp, and sea. It breaks his heart that kings must murder still, that all his hours of travail here for men seem yet in vain. And who will bring white peace that he may sleep upon his hill again?